Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. It is a great morning to talk about spring, and I'm sure everybody with the nice weather we've had for the last few days are itching to get out there and make some changes that you've been thinking about over the winter. We've all spent a lot more time in our yards, and I'm sure that has inspired things as far as improvements or changes and things like that. So let me give you a brief overview of what we're going to talk about for the next hour, and then I'll get into the slides. So the class is going to be kind of divided, or discussion for that matter, is going to be kind of divided into two parts. First, we're going to talk about what you see on the screen now, which is some basic design principles. And I like to call them guides as opposed to rules, because gardening is dynamic and ever changing. So I don't like to use the word rules as opposed to maybe more guides and principles. And every yard is different. So you will have to adapt to what you have. Also, we're first going to talk about the front yard, which has a little bit more to do with curb appeal. And then the second half of the presentation, we're going to talk about your backyard. A couple of things I will get to when we get into some more slides is I will talk about soil a little bit. I did see a little chat message about that. I will address that a little bit later. So with that in mind, let's talk about some of the things you see on your screen here. So one of the things you want to do when you think about the area that you want to work on are views and framing it. So kind of think of it as a picture in a frame, whether you're looking at the front of your house, the corner foundation, the side of your house, even your back patio, which, as I mentioned, we'll get to later. Placement of your larger items like your trees, your shrubs, your structures, trellises, arbors. And I think this is a good time to mention that sometimes the solution isn't always a plant. And we'll see some slides that will show illustrations of that a little bit later. Creating focal points, which can be a plant, an item like a trellis, pots, benches, bird baths, things like that. And things that are a focal point, they need to look good all year round. 4 seasons of interest, we call that. And then connecting the landscape as a whole to your site. So that comes with unity, repetition, and repetition can consist of themes like colors or textures or shapes or your style. That can also create repetition. And then how does the garden fit into the surrounding environment? And that today I think is really, really important in that we want to work with what we have instead of trying to create something that we might have seen in an idyllic situation in a garden or when we were on vacation and those plants are in South Carolina or they're in California, but we live here. So we want to dance with the one that brought us, so to speak. So next. Okay, so here you have a what we call a bird's eye view, and this just kind of illustrates in picture form the slide previous to this that we just talked about. I'm going to go left to right here. So over to the left, you see this large, bold circle with a dot in the middle. That represents a larger tree. And that is a framing plant, which could also be a focal point. Underneath it, you see illustrations of connecting shrubs with the, well, they're not labeled, but I hope everybody can see that. Connecting shrubs A and connecting shrubs B. Then moving into the center with the front door. The focal point draws your eye to the front door, and you'll see on either side of the door there are 2 little circles there, and those are probably some sort of containers. And then you also have a couple of focal point plants on either side of the sidewalk. And then moving over to the right, you'll see that there is a bench, which I talked about a few minutes ago, that we want to incorporate things that aren't always a plant, because sometimes you can have too many plants. And this adds some winter interest as well. You know, this doesn't have to be a bench. It could be a statue. It could be a bird bath. It could be something that you like. And then down toward the bottom at the base of the sidewalk, you see connecting plants D. So this lends unity and repetition. So they kind of connect the two sides of the garden here with some repetition of plants. And then on the right side, going all the way over to the right, which is on the other side of the driveway, you will also see a focal point plant or a framing plant, which is the larger boulder circle there, a path to get out of the driveway and either into the yard or around to the other side of the house. And then down at the bottom, they kind of look like little starburst plants. You also see connecting plants. And you'll see that icon repeated over just to the left of the driveway. It's all by itself. So you have some balance there as well with repetition and connecting. Let's see. Okay, I think that covers that slide. All right, this is another example. This is a little bit more asymmetrical. The slide previous to this was a little more symmetrical. But again, you have framing plants over on the left. You also have connecting plants. You also see the little irregular, they look like stepping stones leading from the driveway to the back, and that's what they are. That's an important thing to keep in mind too when you're trying to do a garden. If you've got a natural pathway in an area that you want to revamp, that you always walk through, leave it there. It's a natural way to go. So as I said, work with what you've got. And then this sidewalk happens to be at a right angle, and you've got that little strip between the house and the sidewalk. Everybody has a spot like this. It can be really tough. And as you can see in the drawing here, it's simple. And that would be my advice, is if you do have a spot like that, keep it simple. And then moving over to the other side of the sidewalk, you have your focal point plant there, right where you walk up, where you're getting out of the car and finding your way to the front door. You want something nice there. And that focal point plant needs to have 4 seasons of interest as well. So, you know, just a reminder, and since we're coming out of winter, we all know this, we look at our plants almost longer when they're dormant than when they are either in bloom or have leaves. So when you go to pick that plant, make sure that you like the way it looks, even when it doesn't have any foliage on it. Or if it's an evergreen, that it's something that can stand up to 4 seasons and looks nice all the time. Some look better than others. Okay, moving along, we have the project as a whole. So before you design an area, you need to know your space. And like I said, it's all about the view. So when you're thinking about the project that you tuned in for today, try to look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. Or, you know, if you've got a friend or a fellow gardener or a neighbor, you can ask them, what do you see when you pull up for the first time? What do you see when a guest gets out of the car into the drive and steps into the yard? What do you see when you go up the sidewalk to or from an area? Look at your views. What do you see from the front door? What is the kitchen out that window? Is it the family room? Is it the patio? What do you see? And do the views change your priority through the seasons? The views can change through the seasons, especially if something loses their leaves, that might change your view. And are there things you want to hide? We'll get into that a little bit more midway through the presentation when we move away from the front of the house. And are there views you like that you might want to frame or enhance?
Hey, Cristin, are you
Yeah.
familiar with any landscape apps that the general public could download that are good?
Um, no, I'll be honest with you. There are a lot of apps out there. I know that there are Proven Winners has a really robust website. I don't know if they have an app, but they have a ton of helpful information on there as well. There are some plant ID apps out there, which are really nice, that you can use to kind of create a database for yourself. I'm not going to recommend a specific one because I haven't found one I really like, but you might want to play around with that a little bit and look at the reviews, see what they're used for, and then maybe try a couple of them on your phone. Can we go back for a second?
Maybe.
Okay, we can move on. Thank you. Okay, this looks a little bit more complicated than it is. This is the same drawing we just had, but we've got some color coding on here now. So your framing plants are kind of in that, it looks to me like like an orangey color. And then you have your focal point plant, which was those, I'm sorry, I'm squinting a little bit, near the front door, and also your framing plant over on the side. Fruit trees close to the house. No, don't put a fruit tree close to your house. An edible fruit tree. Let's see. Okay, we can move on. Okay. This is a great example of planting things that are obviously too close to the house. This happens all the time. I've even been guilty of this. I think one of the biggest challenges for gardeners and new gardeners is trying to visualize how big a plant is going to be when it's fully grown. I tell customers when they come into the nursery to buy something and they see something that's 12 feet tall and they're like, this is perfect. Well, one of the things I ask is, well, does that mean it's perfect right now? And they'll say, yes. I said, well, remember, it's going to get at least double that size. So the analogy I use is you're coming in and you're buying puppies and they're going to turn into dogs. So keep that in mind when you're buying a plant. It's a baby and it's going to grow up just like this big evergreen on the right. So you want to plant at least half the width of the mature plant from the house. So for example, if a plant's going to get 20 feet wide, you need to pull it at least 10 feet away from the house, and maybe more depending on your situation. That should help guide you in what kind of plant that you're going to buy. So figuring out the size of plant that you can have before figuring out the specific plant is important. You'll also see in this photo, where's the sidewalk? You know, there's those big shrubs right in front of it. When you pull into the driveway of a house, you should be able to find your way to the front door very easily. That lends to curb appeal. And in this situation, unfortunately, those puppies have grown up into big dogs and you can no longer find the sidewalk. I'm sure it's also kind of a pain in the neck to shovel it in the wintertime as well. So these are a few examples of kind of what not to do. And we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so now from this angle, you can see that there is a sidewalk leading up there to the front door, but it's not very big. So ideally, we want to take these plants out and create an area that makes it easier to find the front door. And another thing, and makes it easier to get to the front door, kind of depending on where you park. All right, next. Okay, so this is an area for a focal point. You notice that there's an urn right there. That's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. The only problem is you can't see it until you ring the doorbell. So on the right track, but we need to get into getting some plants that are appropriate to scale on here. I did see a question about what if your focal point plant dies? Can you try it again? Yes, but I would talk to someone at the nursery and talk about the situation where the plant is, what are the conditions, what was that plant, and make an assessment. Maybe that wasn't the right plant for that place, or maybe it was just a fluke and, you know, things happen and that one didn't take. We'll be able to advise you on whether you should try that plant again, or whether you should maybe look at something different. Usually I tell folks 2 strikes and you're out. If you try the same plant in the same place 2 times and it dies, that's probably not the right plant for that place. So I hope that answers that question. Okay, next slide. Bushes help for blocking login. Would you replace with shorter if you take the bushes out? Yeah, you can still have bushes here, but these are just too big. There's nothing wrong with having some small bushes right here. They just need to be smaller. So, you know, what I usually tell people is, you know, if you were looking at this plant as a baby in the nursery and thinking of putting it, and this was your house and you were thinking of putting it here, get your measuring tape out, go home and hold it up to 3 feet and see if that's going to work. Because like I said earlier, trying to visualize how big something's going to get when it's fully grown is very difficult. And the other thing I hear, you know, every single day is, well, I can trim it. Folks, you're not going to do that. Look at the slide. You're going to give up. It's going to be too hard. You're going to miss one season of trimming and then you're stuck. So, and you're also creating more work for yourself. So instead of being able to enjoy your plants, you're spending too much time maintaining them. So the old, I can trim it. I usually try to encourage you to find the right size plant for that space instead of going down that road. Okay, moving on. Okay, so balancing the size of your plants to your home size. So it says on here, note the view of the neighbor that affects your own home. So one of the first things you see when you pull up into this house is the neighbor's siding. Now, this is an opportunity to frame your view, which I spoke about earlier, and create curb appeal. You want to be looking at this house is a beautiful front entry with a covered porch. That's what you want to be looking at instead of the siding job on the house next door. So this is an opportunity to create a little area where you could maybe use a screening plant over there. The other thing is, you know, everyone has a different budget and we can appreciate that. This is a big house. So maybe putting into your budget, if you have a house this big, is trying to budget for some plants that go to scale to your house. You might have to spend a little bit more in order to get that. If you can't, is that the worst thing in the world? No, it's just going to be a little bit out of proportion. And conversely, if you have a smaller house, start with smaller plants and make sure that those plants are in scale with your house. Ornamental trees plus the house. I'm not going to get into specific plants today because then we'll be here until dinner time. Our plant finder on our website lets you filter for looking for ornamental plants, such as ornamental trees. Filter down for that and do an assessment of your house and decide how big the tree near your house can be, and then search accordingly. The plant finder on our website is a very effective tool for that. Okay, next slide, please, Becca. Okay, This is what we call the billboard effect. And again, it's, you can't avoid it. We have neighbors, and some neighbors don't plant anything. And that can be a blessing, as opposed to them planting things and not taking care of them. But here's an opportunity to frame this view and do something with it. And I'll show you that in the next slide here. I think, yes, excellent. So this is an example of an opportunity where you can kind of camouflage that look and break it up a little bit. And again, as I mentioned before, the answer isn't always a plant. You need something here that's got 4 seasons of interest and isn't necessarily a plant. So a decorative trellis here with some surrounding connecting plants. And of course, this is your way to your backyard. So taking advantage of that and putting in some nice stepper stones and some smaller connecting plants in between the 2 evergreens here. Please get some idea how much to spend to partly block the view. How much to spend? Okay, well, that kind of is up to you. This is another option. This second option here is probably the higher budget end option. It depends on your budget. Now, how can you try to save a little bit of money? Do you see the purple ovals there on either side of the bench? That's where you could maybe say, it's shady right here and I've got some hostas in my yard. I can transplant, use some things that you've got, spend the money on the bench and maybe on the plants that are right behind it. And then the plants that are forward of the bench, that's where you can divide some things in your yard that you already have and that you like and use those there. Okay, Becca. Okay. Another guide, and sometimes, like I said, you have to dance with the one that brought you. There's a huge tree right in the center of the front yard, and everybody loves that. Their kid comes home from the 2nd grade with a tree from Arbor Day, and everybody proudly mounts it in the front yard, and it stays there and it's little, and then the kids grow up and go away, and mom and dad have a beautiful shade tree blocking the front door. So here is when asymmetry works in your favor. So if you do need shade in your front yard, absolutely plant a tree to give yourself some shade. Just don't mount it like a flagpole right in the front yard, because then it detracts from everything else you want to do. As you can see here, and it's a beautiful illustration of that. Okay, next. Okay, we're going to talk about focal points a little bit. They're obvious. They're an object, they're an area, like a vignette, like we saw in the previous slides. Your focal point can and probably should partly be your front door. Paint is cheap, folks. If your front door is a little worse for the wear, give it a coat of paint. $15 and you've got a wow factor right there. It's the first area your eye sees when you get out of the car, and when you pull it. I'm going to go off track here for a little bit. When we talk about viewpoints, when you pull into your driveway, you shouldn't go, ugh, I need to take that shrub out. You should feel just as welcome coming to your own home as your visitors and your family and your friends are when you pull in. And to that end, then your front yard is kind of, in a way, not just for you, it's for everybody else too, which pays off for you in the long run. So that is another thing you want to think about with focal points in the front. You got that big tree and you don't want to cut it down. Again, I couldn't see the whole question. It got cut off. That's a lot of money to cut down a big tree. Then sometimes you just have to work with what you've got, creating maybe a vignette area off to the side of the tree. That will help detract your view from the big trunk of the tree. So there are ways to work around that. Hiding trash bins. Yeah, that's a hard one. we'll talk about that a little bit. We're going to move over to, no, the side of the house. There are a lot of, to address the question of the trash bins really quickly. There are a lot of things out there on Amazon and Wayfair that they're specifically designed to hide the trash cans and their permanent structures. I kind of recommend those versus plants because then you can put a few plants in front of that to soften it a little bit, and it's just a little bit more effective than using a can or using a plant to hide the can. That's just my take on it. If you want to use screening plants, you can, but don't spend a lot of money on them. They need to be able to take some abuse. You're going to run into them with the cans and probably a fair amount of neglect, because what you're trying to do is hide the cans and not create a focal point with the shrubs that you're using to hide the cans. Okay, moving on. And let's see, I just got to look and see how I'm doing on time here. Okay, we're good. So you want to dry your eye with showy flowers or leaves or structures. And this photo does a really good job of illustrating that. So you have a couple of focal points here that you can see with one is kind of an area, which is the front part of this photo. It's got the beautiful maple there in the background with its fall color and some really nice pots in front of it. So this is kind of what, you describe as a focal point area. But then going farther down the path, you have just the golden tree there standing on its own. That in turn is also the use of a focal point plant. So two different illustrations there of focal points. Next. Okay. The focal point here is number 2, and it's also number 1. Number 1 does frame the house, but it is also a focal point. They kind of can serve 2 roles there. 2 is your, it could be a shrub, it could be a piece of statuary right here too, people. It doesn't have to necessarily be a plant, but it has to be something that looks good all season long. And again, that little strip to the right of the sidewalk, keep it simple. And then you've got a focal point right there up on the front porch with, again, either a pot with some plants in it or a statue that you like, something that draws your eye to the front door and looks good all year round. The plant on the right of the garage also frames, but it too can be a focal point, but it also kind of holds things together on the right side of the house there. And then the connecting plants, again, they repeat the colors, textures, shapes of your landscape. Okay. Oh, hi, Becca. Thank you. Okay. This is a garden here in the western suburbs in early spring. And what you see is the focal point area there with the bird bath. Everybody see the kind of the reddish bird bath? You have 3 white blooming shrubs around it. And then on you have your framing plants on either side, the larger trees. And then you also have, I can't see that. Sorry. Sorry, you have a mixture of evergreens in here as well. So this is a really nice illustration of focal point areas, and some framing plants as well as connecting plants. Next. Okay, so looking at the project as a whole and symmetry, I talk to so many people that I think when they come in, mostly couples, that he likes neat and tidy and symmetry and she likes it looser. or vice versa. And, you know, sometimes I just have to walk away because a marriage counselor needs to come in before they pick out the plants. But everybody has their preferences. One's not right, one's not wrong, but they do lend themselves to different types of architecture with your home. So as you can see in the picture here, you've got an example on the left of Symmetry, you know, kind of a Georgian style house. It's a square with a triangle on top. That's very structured. The house on the right, a little bit more asymmetrical. You've got the door that's off center, the chimney, the porch is a little off center. Your windows are on either side, creating some balance there. But you know, it's not as balanced, but it works. So the left, in a picture like this, once you start with Symmetry, you have made a commitment, is what I usually tell folks. So if that is what you like, go for it. It lends itself to things a little bit more formal, and it lends itself to plants that are a little bit more tidy, more, we kind of say roundy moundy, whereas asymmetrical is a little bit more loose and a little bit more flowing. One's not right or wrong. It's just a particular style. Okay, next. However, you can have too many strong lines, and this picture does a great job of illustrating that. So this house is very much like what we just saw in the previous photo, and that it lends itself to symmetry. But perhaps the folks went to a garden where they saw, you know, boxwood hedges and paths and the like. That can work in a setting like that, but here it's just a lot of strong lines, and we need to break it up a little bit. I can't even imagine what it's like to shovel that sidewalk in the wintertime either. That cannot be fun. The other thing is, when you're coming down the sidewalk from either side, you don't know that there's the main sidewalk, that is, you don't know that there's a sidewalk there. And that's not the point. You want to be able to find your way to the front door. They did a nice job of framing the front door with the urns, but a little bit too much as far as hard lines go. Okay, next. Again, too many hard lines. A lot of folks have these. Yews get a bad reputation. Yews are not your enemy. They just have to be used correctly. And if we do that, then they can be a very useful foundation plant. But in this case, they've kind of overstepped their bounds a little bit, and it's just a big hard line of yews across the front. Is it easy to maintain? Yeah. Is it interesting? No. Okay, next. Okay, another rule of thumb, and again, it's a suggestion, but I think this shows you why it's a good suggestion, is that in our landscape with our winters, you want about 1/3 of your planting bed to be evergreen and 2/3 deciduous. It's a good ratio of year-round interest. Here we went a little bit overboard with the evergreens, and it's boring. And that's a lot of trimming to keep these plants this size. And you can already see that they're starting to come out of their bounds a little bit. So a little bit too much of a good thing here.
Cristin, can I jump in with a couple of questions?
Yes, please.
Can there be too many focal points?
Yes, there can be too many focal points. That's the yard that you see when you drive down the street in your neighborhood and it looks like a carnival. You're like, wow, there's a swan over there and a bird bath there, and there's some big roses over there and they're all in bloom, but oh, look, this is, you know, there can be way too much going on. Your eye does need to be able to rest a little bit. So yes, there can be too many focal points. When you step back to the curb and look at your house from the street or the front sidewalk, the focal points should present themselves fairly clearly. I mean, look at this picture. What do you see? I don't know about you, but my eye is drawn straight up to that front door and I'm not even looking at the shrubs. That is a focal point. You could also probably have a focal point over to the left where I think this must be a corner house because I think the side of the house over there, that is probably the garage. And you have a little bit of an indentation over there. That's an opportunity right there for like a framing plant and a little bit of a focal point there as well. And then way off over to the right, which we can't see in the yard, maybe another opportunity there. We don't need a focal point on either side of the sidewalk here. We have the two soldiers guarding the sidewalk on the way up to the front door. They don't need to be there. So like I said, your focal point should be obvious and not too many. So yes, good question.
Do you have suggestions for focal points on a front door where it's off to the side of the house?
The door is still the focal point. You want to be, when people come up to your house, it should be obvious how they're going to get to the front door. So even if the front door is asymmetrical, can we go back a little bit to that illustration, the slide that has the two houses on it? Yeah, there we go. Okay. So do you see, it's really simple, and I know it's small, but so the front door there's a little planter with a nice plant coming out of it right as you're coming up to the front door. That's a focal point. The chimney, if it's nice, that can be a focal point too. You know, maybe you've got a climbing something that goes up it, or a nice shrub that's in front of it. That can also be a focal point. So the front door can still be your focal point when it's off to the side. You just have to be careful that you don't cover up, say, the window there to the left of it, or that little window to the right. You don't want to cover that up either. So.
And then there was a question about the bushes being too tall on this slide.
Oh,
I think.
Yeah. So, you know, there are, yeah, they're too tall. Are they way too tall? No, not really. You see where the red line goes and bisects the picture of the through the picture of the shrubs. You know, they could be just a teeny bit taller than that. They need to come maybe to like the base of the windows. I know in my own home, my windows in the front are not dissimilar to this photo, but my windows in my front living room, they go all the way to the floor. And my yews that I have in front of my window, I don't let get too tall, but they do serve a purpose. They actually help insulate my home, because if they weren't a little bit taller and coming up to the window like that, it would be very cold over there. Do I need new windows? Yeah, probably. But you know, in the meantime, they are also creating a backdrop for some plants that are in front of it. But yes, they can get too tall. These need to be trimmed. They're a little bit too tall. Coming up to the base of the window should be about where they stop. Okay. Should I stay or should I go? You know, a lot of times that depends on, are you doing the work? How much money do you want to spend? And does it create mission creep? So are these yews in here something that should come out? Can you work with it? Yeah, you probably could if you're willing to do a couple of things, because it looks like they just got a new sidewalk. So you could bring that bed line out a little bit and plant in front of it, because you don't have a lot of competition. You can see do you see the word groups in the plant bar there, deciding to keep or remove plant groups? Go up above it just a little bit. There is a pop-up valve right there. So there's a drain of some sort in there. So you got to pay attention to stuff like that too. You know, you might not want to bring the bed that far out. You want that to be able to drain out into the yard, not into your mulch, or you're just going to have a river of mulch there. So can you work with these plants that are here? Yeah, you probably could. And that would save you a lot of money. It might save you a lot of backache, depending on, who's doing the work. Do you want to start over? You could start over. So there's a lot of things that you can do here. Okay. Next slide. Yep. Okay. Think about your style. Like I mentioned earlier, everybody's different. This is a look that's a little bit more formal, and it works. The picture on the right is very tight, very formal, and they probably have a service that comes in, makes these look like little golf balls for them. That I'm not being judgmental. I think it works for this house. On the left, that's also formal, but it's a little looser. The foliage and the texture of the plants are a little bit more open, but yet it's formal because it's gracing the line of the bed of the yard. That's where you can find a compromise with your spouse. You can find plants, maybe he or she likes things real neat and tidy, but you like it loose. So find plants that are loose, but can be made to look formal. You have a compromise there. Okay, next. Okay, it's your home. Your personality should be reflected through your home. Just like, they say you can tell a lot about a person by the kind of pet that they have. You can also tell a lot about a person by the kind of plants that they like. And that should be a reflection of you. This person's home is contemporary. And, I'd say that the plant choices in front of their house are kind of contemporary too. There's a lot of mixture on use of stone in this as well for interest as opposed to plants. Again, reflecting their personality. Okay. So this ties it all together. Several slides ago, we had a picture where I pointed out that the bird bath was a focal point area with some white shrubs around it. But there were repeating plants and colors in there, creating a theme. So many plants of the same color, texture, or type. And planting in drifts. Folks, you're going to get more impact with fewer plants than having 3 of this, 3 of that, 1 of this, 3 of another. Pick a palette so that you have your theme is maybe your texture or your color. In the top photo, you've got the ruby colored plants. Repeat the ruby color. Use a bird bath that's ruby colored. Use a planter that is maybe ruby colored. So there's your theme. On the bottom, you see there's more like of a chartreuse or a yellow theme going. And again, repeating more of the same kind of plant as opposed to onesies and twosies will keep it more structured, but yet interesting. Okay, and your connecting plant should complement but not distract. So they're your khaki pants. Okay, you've got a great sweater or a great shirt, guys, that you got for Father's Day, and you want to show off the shirt or the sweater. You're not going to put on a pair of plaid pants. You want a pair of khaki pants. And that's kind of what these connecting plants are. They hold everything together. They're a little less bold, but they have an important role in supporting the more important or interesting plants that you're going to put in. And they're useful. A lot of times they're less maintenance. And again, they're smaller, things that you don't have to necessarily spend as much time on with care. Okay. Plant and odd numbers. Yes, but sometimes you can't. Don't get hung up on this, people. It's okay. If you've only got room for 2, and they're going to go right next to each other and they're going to grow into one another, then do 2. And 1 isn't enough. Or think of it this way. Instead of 2, well, do 1. Do you have space left over? Yes, that's where you use a connecting plant. Put something underneath it to kind of fill in so you don't overgrow your space. But planting in odd numbers is easier on the eye. The other thing that happens when you start to plant with even numbers, you're creating symmetry. And as I mentioned before, symmetry is a commitment. You can't mix symmetry with asymmetry. It doesn't work. So planting in those even numbers like that is going to lend itself to being a little bit more formal. Okay. Yeah, think about your house. What color is it? What color is your roof? What color is your siding, your brick? What the color of your front door, your shutters? So when I used to do designs, and I've seen a lot of your yards, maybe some of you are tuned in today, and I've been in your yard. So hello, probably been a while. When you're thinking of your budget, don't just plan on your plants. Like I said, a coat of paint goes a long way. If you don't like the color of your door and you can't afford to replace it, paint it if you can. It does wonders. Does wonders. And it should reflect your personality, but it should also go with your home. My house had it's brick, halfway down, like most houses, and siding the rest of the way up. It is the ugliest brick, folks, in Naperville. I'm not lying. It's the color of a Hershey bar, with no texture in it whatsoever. And I hated it forever. And my COVID project was painting the brick on the front of my house. And after I did it, was it a job? Yeah, it wasn't too bad. I've done worse. I wish I'd done it a long time ago. I spent $100 on paint and some sweat equity and changed the color. And now I don't have to worry so much about what kind of plants I put in front of my house, because I painted it a color that goes with everything, and it looks a lot better, and it updated the house. So when you're thinking of these curb appeal projects, think beyond the plants. Think structure, new shutters, or in some cases, take them off. Maybe, they look bad. If you can power wash the house and get them cleaned up, take them off. And what colors do you like or not like? So don't plant colors that you don't like. This is your house. You need to like it when you pull in the driveway. Okay, next.
I have a
Yes.
question about red house and colors to avoid. I would just
Well,
suggest maybe going and looking online at the complementary colors to red, because there are color wheels out there that you can reference for that kind of thing.
yes. Red can, like a reddish brick, can be hard to work with. But there's a lot of color combinations out there that you can use. A lot of time, yellow is really obvious, and a lot of people, I don't like yellow. Well, you have other choices, and as Becca said, look at the color wheel and see what you can come up with. There's so many choices out there.
Quickly, I'm just going to address this question about containers so they can stay throughout the winter. If they are on concrete surfaces, just cover them. Or if they're touching dirt, you want to raise them up so they're on a hard surface, not necessarily on the ground directly. And then tall, narrow pots have less room to expand and grow with the freeze thaw in late winter. So the wider pots are better. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Becca is your person to ask about containers. She just spent a whole week with them, unpacking them for you. So she can give you some great suggestions on that. And there's a lot to choose from out there as far as containers, as far as lightweight, ceramic, clay, what will work for you in your house. So they're a nice option. Okay. All right, we're talking about the front door here. Here is a red brick house, and the front door is purple. It actually kind of works. I don't think I'd paint my front door purple with a red brick house. That's me. That's not my personality, but it works. Look what they did. They put purple petunias next to it, and the wreath has some purple in it too. So it works. It invites you to the front door. The one on the left is kind of a maize color with a sage green house. That's unusual. Not something that you see a lot of, but boy, does it work. And there's your focal point. It's a good example of a focal point vignette. You've got the door, the wreath, and then you've got a few pots around it. And then the steps leading up to the front door are brick, which are just gorgeous. Your lighting, folks, there's so much new lighting out there right now. I encourage you, if you've got old lights on either side of your front door, there's something in every budget. Think about updating them. The lighting is really a great way, and it doesn't have to be expensive to help lend to your focal point. Also, is your house contemporary? The one down there, the blue one with the little slats, I love it. It's playing to the house's strength, which is contemporary. And then you have your more traditional red doors. And then you got another one down there that's kind of that golden color again. And the little urn there on the side with the pumpkin in it. It's simple, but there it is. It works because that stoop is really small. And they did a good job of picking a container that's in scale with the house that they have, instead of picking something that was too big. Okay, next. Okay, thinking about your texture, shiny, rough, draping, stiff, that can lend itself to your style too. Stiff, like you see in the upper right-hand picture there, that can lend itself to a little bit more formal. Down on the bottom on the right, you get a little bit more stiff in there, mixed with a little bit of soft with the white flowers. And then on the left, you've got that cascading grass there on the right, along with the hosta that gives you a little bit different texture. But then again, the leaves kind of drape down on that as well. And I'm just going to say one thing about color here. The grass in that picture is chartreuse. That is it's bold, but it's a really neutral color, and it goes with everything. So it's an effective repeating color in your yard, especially if you have shade, to use as a repetition in a theme to draw your eye into a darker area. And it goes with everything. It goes with red, it goes with purple, it goes with more pastel colors. So you can, which might be your personal style, you might like softer colors as opposed to bolder colors, and it will go with everything. Along with some of those silvery blues that you see in there too, they're a nice foil for other colors as well. Okay, next. Okay, we talked about thinking of 4 seasons of interest. Do you have plants that look good, add color through the winter, pots that lend themselves to winter interest? Because again, we look at our plants when they're asleep just as long as we look at them when they're awake. So pick something that looks good all season. This is a picture of a crabapple with some ice on it. There are a lot of new varieties of crabapple out there that are not messy. They're not the old-fashioned mushy, smells like vinegar when they fall to the ground kind, that are very resistant to getting spot on the leaf. So that's a nice 4 seasons of interest plant because of the fruit that hangs onto it. And then the birds do you the favor of cleaning it up in the spring. Robins love them, red-winged blackbirds like it. So you're also bringing wildlife and nature, birds into your yard, which is also important, and they're pollinator plants as well. So a plant can also have winter interest through structure. Is it interesting architecturally when it doesn't have leaves? That's another thing that lends itself to that 4 seasons of interest. All right, next. Okay. This picture I'm going to talk about on the left first. There are evergreens that have more colors than green and come in different colors. You can see those back farther in the picture, just above the stones on the slope there. I like that this picture illustrates them in the winter. In the summer, they're going to be a much brighter color, but you also have winter interest too with the grasses that are in the picture. They lend themselves to adding winter color and texture as well. Over on the right-hand photo, you've got that evergreen that's the cone shape there. That's got a little bit different texture. So there's a lot to choose from that's not a boxwood and not a yew.
Oh, hey, Kristen, do you know
Sure.
which grass that big plumy one is on the left? It looks like a miscanthus of
I
some.
think it's I'm okay, I'm trying to remember because I've been in this yard. I think it's a miscanthus, yes. Which one? I don't know. Again, if you're curious about which grass this is, go on the plant finder and type in miscanthus and you'll get the different varieties of it and you should be able to come pretty close to finding which one. Okay, balancing. Larger shrubs or trees to the side or the front of the house, along the back property line, set off your patio or your deck. Those are what are providing you shade, privacy, they're lending structure to your yard, and they frame your house and settle it into the surrounding landscape. And it creates a style, relaxed, formal. You know, there are trees that have a much looser habit. Some have a much more rigid habit. And then again, that can lend itself to your personal style and what you like. Sometimes you don't care what the structure of the tree is. You're more interested in the foliage color. All equal considerations. So, okay. Balance is the equilibrium on your left and your right. Formal is like what we've talked about. Remember when I said when you get into twos, it's a commitment. You can see that there on the top. And then on the bottom is an informal balance. Things are a little bit more asymmetrical, a little bit more off to the left and to the right. Okay. There we go. The larger framing plants, this is back to that drawing again that we talked about where you're going to use your larger plants a little bit further away from the house, over there to the right of the driveway. And then again, left front corner of the house. Notice, so this drawing is to scale. 1 inch equals 8 feet. Now you're looking at it on a slide presentation. But see the little dot there in the middle of the green plant on the left that's filled in green? That dot's pretty far away from the corner of the house. It lets the plant grow to its mature size without touching the house. So that's what I was talking about with making sure you don't plant too close to the house when you use those framing plants. Okay, next. You want to pick your bigger plants first and then your smaller. If you're going to be a DIY type of person on these projects, I always tell people, you know, your adventure in your yard's a journey, not a destination always. So don't be afraid to do things in stages. Picking your bigger plants first that are important because they are big and it's a commitment. You don't want to make a mistake and have to move that type of plant. Put that in and let it rest for a week or two. You know, you have an idea of what you're going to do, that's fine, but you don't necessarily have to plant everything at the same time because sometimes once you get it in, things change a little bit. So this is an example of, you know, they put that's not the right plant for that place. They're trying to hide the air conditioner, which I understand. And that is a really weird place to have your air conditioner. But, you know, hey, things happen in construction. But that isn't the right plant for that place. So we could have made a better choice here. Okay, next. This is allow for how big the plant's going to be. Again, here was the puppy that is turning into a dog. We wanted it, that plant probably looked great, got a great deal on it, and it hid the hose reel right away. And then bang, it's now way too big for that spot. So that's a good illustration of that. Okay. This is a little bit too much of a good thing. This person either likes their hedger quite a bit, or they have a service that comes and keeps this in bounds. The plant that's in the middle is too big. That's okay, we can add that. So adding the diagram in here really gives you an idea of how hard these lines are. The next slide will give you I think it adds a layer. Yeah. So instead of the meatballs across the front, maybe have putting in a few plants that have some movement in them would have softened that up a little bit. And yet it keeps the formal look. So you want to balance your texture and your load here. There was too much stiff stuff there and not enough movement. It makes it a very static view. Okay, next. Okay, how large? These are questions you ask yourself when you start. How high are your windows off the ground? Who's going to take care of this? Do you use those rooms that view out onto your front yard? Do you need privacy right there? A lot of us have turned that front window into a home office and discovered that sitting there every day isn't like, I don't like this. I can't see. I need more light in here. Or maybe there was nothing there and you're waving to your neighbors walking the dog all the time while you're on a Zoom call. So what are your views? And again, remembering the mature size of the plants when you take into consideration those views. Okay, next. Okay, I cannot emphasize this enough. Do not, if you're going to put all this money and sweat equity into this project, do not skimp on your bed lines. They are the shading on the picture, icing on the cake. Pick your example. It is what's going to help make everything pop. So as you can see here, somebody pulled out whatever was in the front here. So where you see the bed line, that little camel hump, those two camel humps there, and then that dead space of dirt, and then the grass starts, that shows you where the plants had outgrown that bed. The yellow line shows you a much more realistic bed line. Don't skimp on your bed. If you pull it out and it was a 3-foot bed line, that's too small. It's too small for anything. And then you've got that little bay window there that you're going to lose rainfall. You need to accommodate for these structural things. And the downspout there. So that yellow line is a much more realistic example of where your bed line should be.
Cristin,
And
do
they
you have
need to,
any ideas to work with the drain spout like that?
yes. So I've been doing this for a long time. Bury the downspout. It's okay. It can be buried and have it come out in the grass. You remember that picture several slides back where that pop-up drain or that drain top was in the grass? That's a great example of effectively burying a downspout and having it come out in the lawn. It's a good use of part of your budget. It's not that expensive. If you want to do it yourself, there's lots of YouTube videos on how to do it. What I usually tell folks though, if you have a project and it's a lot and you want to do some of it yourself, spend the money on having a professional prep it for you, and then you do the planting. So spend the money on the removals and spend the money on, say, like in this picture, having that downspout buried, and then you can go in and do the plantings yourself. You can also run an extension onto that downspout or direct it, as long as you're directing it in the direction of the slope away from your house and you're not giving your neighbor all your water. So you have to be a mindful neighbor when you do that, but really burying it is effective. Okay. Again, your bed line should follow the flow from the existing curve, not from the corner of your porch. It makes it hard to mow, and it also cuts off your opportunity to have a decent bed line there. So you want to follow the yellow line, not the existing red line there. And again, it's a much more natural mow line for you. Okay, next. And again, don't pull the bed line from the corner of the sidewalk. You don't have to necessarily have it go all the way down the walk, but you don't want to pull it from the corner there. Again, it creates a mowing nightmare. There you go. Like I said, it doesn't have to go all the way down to the corner. It can come to the corner right there. And this is just yet another example of that. There you go. All right, next. Here, yeah, that's what I was talking about earlier, is an unrealistic bed size. That just does not work. If you like that, the stone edging, that's okay. Just pick it up and move it out a few feet. If you don't want to do that, then you're going to need to pick plants that are tiny and are going to fit in that spot. Can that still look nice with that existing bed line? Yeah, it probably could. You just have to get the right plants in there. The unfortunate thing is that not a lot of shrubs are going to fit in that spot. So then you're going to end up with the lattice work showing in the wintertime. So it's kind of a give and take there. All right, next. Okay, how to calculate spacing. I'm going to try to simplify this a little bit. So don't get too hung up on these numbers. You need to plant away from the house, first of all. Yeah, you need airflow. You need to be able to get in there to clean the windows, and general maintenance. The other thing is, if you get your plants too close to your foundation or your house, you're going to start to get that green mossy stuff growing in there, and that's a pain in the butt to try to clean. So allow for airflow, and you're allowing for your plants to grow all the way around as opposed to only on the front side. You have to pick, the plant you picked is say 3.5 to 5 at mature growth. You plant half the distance on center. So 4 is the middle number there for the spacing required. The center should be about 4 feet apart, and they need to be about 3 feet away from the house. So if the plant's going to get, 5 feet wide, you need to get it away from the house. Ooh, excuse me. Okay, next. Things you can't change. The eaves. A lot of times we call these the overhang of death, because everybody comes in, everything I plant here dies. Well, yes, it's not getting any water. So don't plant under the eaves. Get it out into the rain line. That might mean choosing something smaller. That might mean not planting anything there and coming up with something that's not a plant. But try not to plant under the eave. It's just more work for you, and it's not a recipe for success. Okay. All right, moving on to the backyard. What time is it? Ooh, okay. I'm going to talk really fast. This is your personal space, like we talked about. This is where you can have the things that might not look great in the front, in the back. And you need to think about what time of day you're out there. What activities do you like to do? Do you need to leave some lawn space because the kids are kicking the ball around? You're playing catch. Do you have a pet? Do you need to have room for your pet to be able to run and play fetch? Or your pet has a place where it likes to lounge? Where are you going to put your grill? Please don't make your grill your focal point. Do you need shade? These are things you need to think about for the backyard. Next. Okay. This lends itself to views. These pictures show things that are a little bit looser. Sometimes the backyard is a little bit more informal, and these plants kind of illustrate that little bit looser look. Okay, next. Again, a little bit looser. What kind of plants do you like? 4 seasons of interest here. The plant down in the bottom left is the same as the plant in the right, but the larger view is the fall color. Is that something that's important to you in the backyard as well? Next. This shows you again different textures, different colors. There's some coral bells up there, which is the burgundy colored plant. You want to leave that crown up. Don't cut that plant all the way back if you use it, but this is a way to incorporate different colors and textures into your backyard, especially if you have shade. All of these plants that you see right here do better in some shade. A lot of us have shadier backyards if we have more trees. Next. Again, your views. What are you looking at? This is an example of a serviceberry. It has 4 seasons of interest. It looks good from far away. It gets a lot of flowers, it gets a nice fruit set, and then it has nice fall color. So again, it's a really great plant for using in a backyard, anywhere in the yard actually, except right by your driveway, because it does look good and helps frame your view in your backyard. And it brings wildlife to the yard. Birds love it. This is a little over the top, but it is an example of framing your view. You know, there's a natural area in the very back of this garden, and your eye gets led through the path of the garden getting back to it. And there's a nice mix of structure and loose here. The arborvitaes are more structured, where those little white flowers that are off the path are called calamintha. They're much looser, but they help guide you down the path. Okay. This isn't a botanic garden, but this also is an example of if you have sun. This is very heavy with perennials here. So you're not going to get as much interest, but if you do have an interest in perennials, this is a great use of layering. In the very back, there's some tall yellow flowers. It's probably some sort of a heliopsis. Then moving down into some lower plants, the penstemon there with the burgundy plumes. That's probably fairly tall. That might be at least 3 feet tall there. And then in the very front, you have some allium plants, the little purple things, that flowers that are blooming. This is a late summer garden. These plants come into their glory in the late summer and give you some interest in August and September. Okay. Again, we talked about right plants in the right place. Again, you know, trying not to fit the plant you want into the place that's not right for it. The site determines what kind of plant goes there. And there's so many plants to choose from out there that you will probably be able to find something that you like. I'm going to open it up to questions.
I had one about the ideal flower bed size, like minimums.
Oh, sure. It kind of depends on what you want to do and how much work you're going to do. How much area do you need to devote to lawn? Because based on your activities, not because grass is important, but based on your family and your style. But a minimum, if you're going to plant flowers for a depth, 6 feet. If you want to be able to layer, 3 feet is not a lot of space. If you only have that much space, if you have a smaller urban yard, then fewer plants in that spot. But 6 feet will give you room for layering, like what you saw in one of the last slides. Anything else?
Our spring hours this year, we open April 1st. That is a Friday. We are going to do some special events on the Saturday in Naperville and the Sunday in Aurora. Watch the website for that. But then for spring, we are 7 days a week, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Rachel had a question about front of house, large shade tree is killing off grass, but she doesn't want to remove the tree. Do you,
Yeah, that's a tough one. So I'm guessing it's probably a maple. They have a lot of surface roots and they're always going to win for water. So you have a couple of choices. You can, I don't recommend trying to get the grass to grow. You're just going to waste water and you're going to water the tree, which is important. But mulching the area where the grass isn't growing and making it look neat and tidy, and then you're not running over the roots of the trees all the time with the lawnmower. So wherever that border is to where the grass starts to flourish, that's where your mulch line should be. So the rest of it, I'd put a nice thick layer of mulch down, and it's going to look really nice.
you could also add a bench or a container or
Yes.
something under there as well, instead of
Yes.
actually planting in the ground.
Right. Yeah, I don't recommend underplanting it either. And Becca makes a great suggestion, make it a little quiet sitting area. The answer isn't always a plant.
All right, any other questions, everybody? Recommendations for persistent weeds?
Persistent weeds. Oh, wow. The challenge with persistent weeds is that it can take several seasons to get rid of them because they reseed, and you got rid of the initial plant, but the seeds are in there and they come back. So it might take a couple of seasons. The most effective weeding is pulling them out, especially when they're little. And like after it's rained, when the ground is pliable and friable, you can get out there and pull them up. There are some organic weed killers out there. We do sell some of them, but they just take longer to work. I don't recommend a synthetic based product. They're just too hard with the runoff that's going to go down into the water system. So the most effective method for the persistent weeds is to get out there and get them when they're little. Yes, there were a few more questions, but Becca, I'm going to let you funnel them to me because I can't keep up with the ones on the bottom.
Okay, so fruit tree recommendations, I would suggest that is very site specific. So if you want to email grow@thegrowingplace.com with that question, we can find out for you, or stop in when we open and we'd be happy to help you on the sales floor with fruit trees that are good for your spot.
Yes. That I will just interject that do your homework with a fruit tree. Because a lot of times you need more than one for cross-pollination. If you don't have room for more than one, use the website to find trees that don't need a cross-pollinator if you only have room for one.
And then there was another question about weeping white spruce in 5B zone.
A weeping white spruce? Oh, they should be fine. It depends on the variety though. There are different kinds of weeping white spruce. So I would just make sure that the one you're looking for will grow here. And that is not a plant we normally carry. I will say that.
And then Tom has everybody's very question about rabbit resistant plants. We do designate rabbit resistant, deer resistant inside our plant guide and on the plant search online, and also on our signs. It's a guideline. It's not a promise, because rabbits don't know how to read the signs or the plant guide information. But fuzzy leaves, what other things? Fragrant, like anything that is
Minty.
kind of like minty or alliums, or it has anything that has a strong scent or a rough textured kind of leaf is a good guideline.
Yeah.
And then the last question I have here is about the landscape design fees that we have. This year we are doing virtual consultations only. And they are $200, and you can sign up online. You just go to thegrowingplace.com. Under the services tab, there's a landscape design information link, and then there is the link to purchase and sign up on that page for landscape design. And it's cool. We have 2 great designers that can do it all virtually. And you just do your measurements, send in some pictures, and then you have conversations with them, and you'll get a really nice plan that will work for your yard.
Yes, they look similar to the plans that we had on the presentation. Is a good example of what you would get for that. It's for one section of your yard, like your front yard.
Yeah,
That was
it's a 200 square foot area, but you can combine 2 for a 400 square foot area, but that's as big as we'll go. We do carry native plants. Sorry. They are also designated in our plant guide and on the search and on our signs. We have a whole bunch of different native plants available, and also nativars, which are crosses between the natives and some cultivars. And then we can do some planting, but we also have companies that we can recommend to do landscape design for you, or excuse me, planting for you.
Yes.
All right, well, as always, we talk a lot in this presentation. I'm going to end it here and say thank you for joining us. And we can't wait to see you on the April 1st at 10 a.m. sharp. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thank you.
Yes, thanks everybody. Can't wait to see you in person.